Hello, this is Nice Wonder. You're watching the NOWMAN show, and my guest right now is Francesco Lupica, who is a musician based out of California. And he's played in numerous bands, including Shanti. He's now a solo artist. He made an album called The Cosmic Beam Experience. Since that time, he's performed many live shows. He's had his music in sound design as well as additional music in films such as Terrence Malick's The Thin Red Line, also the winner of the Palme d'Or Award at the Cannes Film Festival in 2011 for the film Tree of Life with Brad Pitt and Sean Penn. There's been sound effects with the Cosmic Beam Experience in films such as Star Trek The Motion Picture, and most recently you can hear his music in Martin Scorsese's Silence and also Jordan Voight Roberts' Kong Skull Island. Here is Francesco Lupica and the Cosmic Beam Experience right now. Erika Podest has a PhD and is a JPL NASA scientist with the Carbon System Ecosystem Group. She is an Earth scientist. Welcome back to the NOWMAN Show.
Thank you, Dan. It's really great to be here.
And it's great that you're back because there's a lot to talk about. I mean, and since we last talked, you know, we know that you work with the SMAP program, which is a satellite that goes around the Earth how many times a day? Or
a couple.
A couple times a day. And it does swaths and gathers data of the moisture in the soil all over the planet. That's just amazing to me. And then you look at that data, and then you go to the northern high latitudes in person, which is Alaska, Russia, Eurasia, and then you put all your data together on there. In the last year, just since we've last talked, what have you seen? What have you discovered?
Okay, well, first of all, let me tell you a little bit about SMAP. We just came up on our 2-year anniversary since it launched.
Oh, wow.
And SMAP has been measuring not only soil moisture globally, but it also measures what's called the frozen or thawed state up in the northern high latitudes.
So like Greenland? Or?
That means whether the land surface is frozen or thawed. That's the length of the growing season, right? So the northern high latitudes are driven by strong seasonality. So you've got the 4 seasons that are very well marked. And one of the concerns about the northern high latitudes is that these areas are ground zero for climate change. This is the canary in the coal mine. And the first areas and the areas where there's the largest impact in terms of increasing temperatures. So what we're seeing is that the growing season length, that's the period of time when the vegetation grows, is getting longer, right? So during this period of time, there is a very large exchange of gases between the atmosphere and the vegetation. And you'd think that that's a good thing, right?
Because you're seeing more growth,
that's right.
Or greenery.
So there's more CO2 being taken up from the atmosphere by the vegetation. But it's a complex system, and we're seeing that there's less water availability, and so trees become stressed and they basically shut down. Or there's more and more days now where you've got very high temperatures, and this stresses out trees as well. So it's not only about vegetation either. You've got soils up in those areas that have been frozen for hundreds and thousands of years. These are called permafrost soils, and they store huge amounts of carbon.
Yes.
So the concern is, as temperatures increase, these soils
Hello, welcome to the NOWMAN Show. I am NOWMAN, the superhero of the present moment. Hello, this is Nice Wander, and I'm in front of the Dearly Departed Tours in Hollywood on Sunset Boulevard, and we're going to talk to the founder, Scott Michaels, right now. I am here in Hollywood at the Dearly Departed Tours with founder Scott Michaels. How are you, Scott? Thank you for being on the NOWMAN Show.
Thanks for asking.
This is fantastic. Now, you have been doing these really odd tours of all sorts around the Hollywood area since the 1990s. Is that correct?
That's right. I came here in '94 to take over the old Graveline tour, where you go to the old Cadillac hearses. And yeah, that's why I moved to LA.
And so you've been doing Dearly Departed tours now since 2005?
That's right. I started this company. Our first tour was January 1st, 2005. Yes, we made it 10 years. God.
Scott, what made you want to get in this kind of business?
I've been fascinated with this sort of dark side of Hollywood since I was a kid. I've always been sort of exposed to death. I've seen it from a really young age, not in a dramatic way, but I've seen dead people, and it just never really bothered me that much. In fact, it fascinated me. So when I heard about the Graveline tour, and I thought, well, that's fantastic. That's what I want to do, because to me these are historic things, and I've assembled what I think people should see. I say anything I do, any tour I offer, anything I sell in my shop, anything I show in my shop are things that interest me, things that I would buy, things that I would do. So it's sort of, that's how I judge it. It's probably a very selfish way to do it, but it makes me believe in what I offer.
Fantastic. But there's different types of tours that you do though. Let's run those down. Can you run those down for me real quick?
Well, our standard Dearly Departed tour, which is what we're pretty well known for, and that's a lighthearted look at the dark side of Hollywood. So it's about 3 hours, about 70 different locations where mostly terrible things happen. But since it is the history tour, we go into a bit of the history of Hollywood, and we stop at the cemetery to say hello to Marilyn Monroe and Dean Martin. The Helter Skelter tour I started about 7 or 8 years ago, devoted strictly to the Tate LaBianca murders, more famously known as the Manson murders, and that goes out on Saturday mornings. And it's a retracing the killers' their steps after the murders, where they hosed off in the driveway and where they threw the clothes off the cliff, as well as where the victims used to live and work and hang out. So it's a pretty, I think, balanced story for considering it so horrific. We offer a movie locations tour, and we offer lots of things. We have a tour that we do with a couple of celebrities. Allison Arngrim from Little House on the Prairie hosts a tour. Bridget Marquardt from The Girls Next Door hosts a tour with us. So it's just a mishmash of all sorts of things.
So there's something for everyone that likes a historical tour of Hollywood that's a little offbeat.
Well, yeah. Again, it's Hollywood is an odd place, and we're not very reverential, Although it is history and we respect the people, we will go for a cheap joke too. And I think that's why locals like us as well, because we're not, oohing and ahhing over somebody's hedges. But this is the real deal. These are the street corners, the restaurants where they had the Last Suppers, where these things that we've all read about and heard about for decades, where they actually happen. So it's history, but it's not like, Civil War history. It's the fun kind.
Exactly, and a lot of people like history. So Scott, let's take a look at some of the memorabilia that you have around the gallery here. How long has this gallery been open?
We opened here about 3.5, almost 4 years ago now on Sunset Boulevard. But all these items in the shop are things I've been collecting over the years, mostly having to do with awful events. Although there are some nice things in here that have been loaned to us, Marilyn Monroe's cake pan and telephone bill, and my little friend Sadie's costume from the Rocky Horror Picture Show. But also we have, a piece of Sharon Tate's fireplace and a tile from the pool that Brian Jones of the Rolling Stones drowned in. So
let's take a look at that stuff. All right, let's go. and what, this is a rock from the Sharon Tate Polanski place?
That's right, yeah. They destroyed the house in 1993. And I went up there and I call it liberated a large portion of the fireplace.
Really? Wow.
And it's here because it's history. Again, I don't have millions of dollars to save a house or a restaurant or a hotel that's been torn down, but I can hop a fence and grab a brick from it, and that way everyone can see it. It may be, to some people, it's just a lot of junk, but to me, it's more important than that.
It's a piece of history. That's fantastic. What else do we have here?
Well, there are other things like funeral flowers. This is a restaurant menu from Mezzaluna where Nicole Simpson had her last supper.
Oh, wow.
This photograph of Rock Hudson standing by the bed that he died in. He died in 1985 in this bed. Now, this bedpost that you see right there is this bedpost.
Oh, wow. Wow.
And it's all sorts of things. A piece of John Denver's airplane that disintegrated when it hit the ocean.
Wow.
A tile from the pool that Brian Jones drowned in, who founded the Rolling Stones in 1969. He drowned in the pool in England, and that's a piece of it. These items were donated to me. These were in Jean Harlow's dressing room when she died in 1936.
Wow.
And one of my favorite pieces is the pink suitcase.
Ah, the pink suitcase, which is...
Jane Mansfield's. She packed this the night she was killed. This was in the accident that killed her in 1967.
So this was in the car.
This was in the car. And there's in this little heart-shaped box, you can see, that's some of the glass from the windshield. That is all that's left of the heart-shaped swimming pool. There's some pink bricks from the house when they tore it down. And right below that is a lock of Manson's hair that somebody sent me recently.
Wow, that's bizarre.
It runs all over the place in here. But yeah, upstairs, downstairs, I have Karen Carpenter's bathroom sink, a piece of the Hindenburg.
Oh, a piece of the Hindenburg?
Carol Lombard's plane crash. It's all over the place in here. So there's all sorts of weird things banging around here at nighttime.
And this is an outfit here from a friend of yours who was in the cast of the Rocky Horror Picture Show.
That's right. Yeah, Sadie Corey. She was 4'2". She was the smallest of the Transylvanians that did the time warp. And she and I became very good friends. I lived in England for several years, and I co-wrote this book about Rocky, and I became friends with a lot of people that made the movie, and Sadie was my best friend.
And you know, actually, of course, we're going to be showing this at a different time, but actually on this day, I think it's NBC is airing a reunion of the original cast of Rocky Horror this morning.
I found that this morning, and all those people were terrific to me. Every one of them gave me an interview for my book, and just a nice group of people. It was an honor. I spent most of my childhood with these people, or my teens, so it's a real honor to give them tribute when I did that.
And it's been, 50 years now, I believe.
40 for the film, and the show came out 42 years ago.
Wow.
So we're coming up on a 50.
Wow, that's amazing. That's amazing. Well, thank you so much, Scott. This is Nice Wander on the NOWMAN Show with Scott Michaels from Dearly Departed Tours, and you're watching the NOWMAN Show. Now, you do tours all year long, like...
the ghost tour that we offer. Yeah, we started that about a year ago, and it runs all year round on Saturday nights. And it's a walking tour of Hollywood, but instead of one of those paranormal tours where you're getting meters and things like that, it's hosted by The Undertaker with a big top hat and a Victorian veil and a candelabra walking through the streets of Hollywood. And it's really fun. It's more of a Ghost and Mr. Chicken sort of experience, or the Haunted Mansion sort of a thing. It's just good fun. They're real ghost stories, and I wouldn't hire somebody that would make it annoying. He's just good fun.
That sounds great. And what do you have to say, Marilyn? Oh, it's
Scarolyn Monroe.
All right, don't you just love it? Hello, this is Nice Wander. Welcome to the NOWMAN Show. And we are live on YouTube. And I am here right now with H Groove. Hello, Hassan.
Hi, Nice to meet you, Dan.
Nice
to see you again.
Nice to see you again. Yes, always. What's the first song you're going to play for us?
So the song is called Insane. It's like a reggae, and yeah, it's called Insane.
All right, let's get insane right now with H Groove.
Nada, hasta que es embrujada. Un loco alumbra mi mirada. Se burla del mundo, se burla del abismo. Me dice que al final acabamos en lo mismo. Yo no sé qué pasa, miro al otro lado. Veo un loco, me cuenta su pasado. Me dice cuidado si te has equivocado. Nunca te tropieces por haber caminado. Yeah, look into my eyes. Yeah, find a reason why. Yeah, living a reality. Yeah, make me go insane. Yeah. So vengo, soy como un latido, donde está el momento de estar contigo. Pero si te tengo yo en el olvido, me quedo quemado porque ya no estoy contigo. Y es que en la casa ya no encuentro el tiempo, ya no encuentro nada para ver tu mirada. Y es que te tengo loca, tú me tienes fresco. Nena, ven despacio haciendo que yo la merezca. Y es que ya te tengo, ya te contradije. Tú te das la vuelta y yo ya te hice. Y es que tienes hambre y yo ya te dije. Nena, aquí te tengo, yo te dije, me dijiste. Yeah, look into my eyes. Yeah, find a reason why. Yeah, living a reality. Yeah, make me go insane. I can take this beat and make it higher. Listen to this song, is spitting fire. Bleeding every day just makes me stronger. Going through this pain just takes me further. Yeah, look into my eyes. Yeah, find a reason why. Yeah, living a reality. Yeah, make me go insane. Yeah, make me go insane.
All right. That was fantastic.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. So now what's the name of the next song you're going to do for us?
The next song is called Fuego. That means fire.
Excellent. Here is H Groove.
Abre tus ojos para ver lo que vas a recorrer. No te vayas a perder. Mi hermano, mi amigo, saca la mano, sal del olvido. El camino se vuelve hermoso, bórralo con este ritmo sabroso. Siente como rompe tu mente. Europa, África y Medio Oriente. Indio nativo, yo lo digo en esta casa, estás bienvenido. Ya no sé qué puedo hacer, creo que voy a enloquecer. El fuego empieza a encender, vamos a hacerlo crecer. ¿Cuánto tiempo voy a esperar hasta que el mundo empiece a terminar? Vente, nena, embárrate en mi cama. Ya sé que tus padres son de Alabama, no hay drama. Yo me mezclo contigo, hagamos una fiesta. Digamos hijos de insisto, cuidado con mi pista que te hace pequeño, te arrastra y te pisa. Te escupo la verdad en la cara, mi letra exclama. Ya no sé qué puedo hacer, creo que voy a enloquecer. El fuego empieza a encender, vamos a hacerlo crecer. Ya no sé qué puedo hacer, creo que voy a enloquecer. El fuego empieza a encender, vamos a hacerlo crecer. Ya no sé qué puedo hacer, creo que voy a enloquecer. El fuego empieza a encender, vamos a hacerlo crecer. Vamos a hacerlo crecer.
All right, fantastic. I love that song. That riff really gets under the skin, you know. Are you going to do another song for us?
Yeah.
Let's chat a little bit first. Want to do that? First of all, I know your name's Hassan. Tell me your last name.
My last name is Dahik.
Dahik. Okay, now this is H Groove, I assume. H stands for Hassan.
Yes, H Crew was a name that people back home, I'm from Ecuador, by the way. So back home, people used to call me H Groove because it was a way of describing like how I play or my sound. Now I'm here and I have these amazing musicians with me that contribute a lot to what we're listening right now. So yeah, I would say it comes from my name.
Fantastic. So you definitely have a great groove there. So Ecuador, Quito?
Exactly, I'm from Quito, one of the highest capitals in the world.
You mean elevation-wise?
Elevation-wise.
Let's clarify that one, right? Yeah. So what inspired you to get into music in the first place?
It's something that came from the inside. I don't know. I just love rock and roll. I love funk, hip hop, Notorious, different genres that inspired me to create. I just love to express myself and be the voice of many others that sometimes cannot say things or express themselves, you know?
Yeah, and you're multinational too, right? Multi-ethnic and...
Yeah, I am half Lebanese, I could say. My mother was born in Chile, so I have different, I don't know, things in myself, I could say.
Parlez-vous français?
No.
Because in Lebanon, I know they speak French.
Yeah, they speak Arabic too.
Yeah.
I would love to answer oui, but I don't speak French, so I just speak Spanish and English.
Oh, really? So you don't speak any Arab or any...
No, because it's not that close. But yeah, I speak Spanish and English.
So did you study music all the way through school, or did you start real young?
Yeah, I would say I started 12 years ago, so I was always into that and learning by myself, like going on YouTube, listening to music, and then suddenly I went to college, and I started pursuing bass. So that's when I learned like some of my bass techniques, but mostly because of listening or going to shows or hanging with people that are musicians mainly.
Fantastic. So now when you came here to Los Angeles, you came here specifically to go to the Los Angeles music school?
College. Yeah, it was one of the reasons, and that's where I met this awesome group of people.
Now that's here in Pasadena. It's called Los Angeles
College of Music, LACM. Yeah.
Yes. So so let's meet the other guys, shall we? These are obviously your compositions, right?
Yeah, but it's arrangements comes from everyone.
That's
so
right.
yeah.
That's right. So let's meet everybody. Let's start over here with the guitar. And so I know your first name, you're Sebastian, right?
My last name is Jimenez, yes.
Jimenez, yes, of course. That must mean that you're from...
Mexico.
Yeah. Were you born and raised there?
Yes, in Mexico City. Yeah, that's where I was born and raised.
Fantastic guitar work. Oh, I love that design on that. That's fantastic. Did you buy that here?
Yes, I actually bought it in Hollywood, yeah.
In Hollywood?
Yeah.
So when did you first discover music?
Well, when I was very little, my family will always just play music, and my dad loves rock and roll, like classic rock and roll. So I always used to listen to that, and also like Peter Gabriel. He always used to play Peter Gabriel, and he told me that when I was like really, really young, I always started dancing to that music. So yeah, like I guess I've always been a musical guy since little.
Yeah, Peter Gabriel is excellent. I don't know if you're familiar. Have you ever heard of the World of Music, Arts, and Dance?
No, not really.
That's a festival he started. It's awesome. I mean, they only do it like once a year now, but it went on tour. And I'm so happy I got to see it because all these music artists from all over the world, right? Because he's got a label called Real World, you know? And he had some of them on the stage. Beautiful, like Burundi drummers from Africa. It was just, doing Biko, if you know that song, live. I was like, just awesome, and great. Great, and that's a great influence because that was one of the major influences for me. So I totally get that. Okay, and here, the one LA guy in the band, and I know your first name is Roman, right?
Yeah, my full name is Roman Castro. I was born and raised in Montebello. So yeah, I've been an LA guy all my life.
And so when did you first discover music?
Pretty early on, I would say around 13, I started playing in church. My parents talked to the drummer at the church to get me to go to church. They taught me how to play drums, so I kind of been doing that ever since.
Yeah, that's where I got my music education too, so church is good. So what are some of the bands and artists that influenced you growing up?
Like the usuals, Led Zeppelin, Black Sabbath, but as I've gotten older, I started studying more like hand percussion techniques from around the world, so world percussion.
Fantastic. Any particular favorites?
Right now, off the top of my head, I would say Pete Lockett and Tom Teasley are two of my biggest influences as far as hand percussion goes.
Fantastic, fantastic. Thank you for being on the NOWMAN show. And our one European in the band, Adam, what's your last name?
Lindberg.
Lindberg. Is that a common name in Sweden?
Yeah, it's pretty common. In Sweden and in Finland too, I think. Yeah.
Yeah. So now you played drums ordinarily, so you didn't bring your drum kit with you today.
Yeah.
What did you get inspired by growing up? And by the way, in Sweden, where in Sweden?
Well, I live in a town called Västerås, and it's like an hour from Stockholm, so it's like in the middle of Sweden.
So it's like a small town?
Yeah, it's like 150,000 people, so it's a small.
Yeah, that's considered small. I would call it a small city. I lived in really smaller places than that. So what music inspired you growing up?
Well, I remember when I was like 6 years old, my mother or my parents got me an Elvis Presley
Really?
CD. So I started to dance along with Elvis Presley.
Yeah, yeah.
And after that, I got a little bit into Kiss. And for a while, I got into hip-hop. And then later on, some more like heavy stuff, like heavy metal, death metal. And then I ended up in like Latin, yeah, this kind of music.
Oh, it's fantastic. So you've had quite the journey, as many of us have had, learning and expanding our horizons on all the beautiful music that's out there, and keep doing that, man.
Yeah.
And you have a rich heritage in your country too. I know people have mixed emotions about ABBA, but they were a huge influence. I mean, can't deny that. There's other bands too, like not Jan Ackerman. Is he from Sweden? Jan Ackerman? He's from Scandinavia. I know that. You've heard of the group Focus?
I've heard of it, but
Yeah. You might be want to check them out. Yeah, Jan Ackerman. He's awesome. Well, thank you guys so much for being on the NOWMAN show. This is great, And Hassan, what are you going to take us out with today?
So we're gonna play a song called ¿Qué pasa? And we've been recording this track with John Avila. So we'll release the music video of this song maybe at the beginning of next year.
Oh, fantastic.
So yeah, this song is called ¿Qué pasa? And thanks for everything.
Well, and I have to talk to you about that because we hope to get John on the show eventually. And John's a great guy. John, for those of you who may not know, was a bass player with Oingo Boingo, and he teaches bass. One of his students right here at the college. So I'm looking forward to seeing that video, hearing that music. Now, what I didn't ask you is what all these individual songs are about. So first of all, what's Insane about? Tell me a little bit about that.
Well, when I was writing Insane, I was imagining like a haunted house because it had like a heavy groove and like, I don't know, like a ghost telling like things, laughing about humanity because there's like all these fights going on, and at the end of the day, we're all ending up in the same, like dead or whatever. So yeah, it's kind of like that, kind of cold. So like he's laughing at us, and that's like the point of that song. It's like scary. Then I have Fuego, that is like for everyone that has ever been like pushed around, maybe because of different circumstances. It's like a wake-up song, like, hey, you deserve more, you are more. Stand up your ground and speak for yourself. So that's what Fuego talks about.
Fantastic.
Fuego means fire, so it's a way of, increasing people confidence, probably. Yes. And then ¿Qué pasa? ¿Qué pasa means like what's happening, what's going on. It's like a question of what's going on in the world today. Where are we going? Where are we heading? I just don't know, but I can do music and express what's going on today. So that's kind of what my songs talk about. Like they have a lot of details because it's some of it's Spanish and yeah, but mainly is that.
Yeah, it definitely comes from a lot of feeling as well. So thank you for doing that.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah.
So now, ladies and gentlemen, here is ¿Qué pasa? Right now. H Groove.
I don't know what's the problem, if you can find the answer, yeah. In this whole world that's burning, in this whole world that wants to end. Lo predigo con furia, prendido, fenicia, sumisa. El fuego te avisa, relaja lo oscuro, revela lo claro, rimando frecuente en un mundo dañado. De hecho, lo sospecho, prefiero ser libre, soy mi propio techo. Yo sé qué pasa, I don't know what's going on. Quítale la masa, no sé, no freaking control. Pero el futuro, let the time find for yourself. Ver un mundo nuevo, where there's nowhere else to go. Listen to this revolution, exploding in your ears. Listen to this reality of people that don't have fear. No es locura si te miente, muestra los dientes, rompes esquemas, deja tus penas, pierdes arrogancia entre letras pruebas y manchas escapadas, cantas tapadas de sangre, hasta me faltan palabras exactas. No, yo no sé qué pasa. I don't know what's going on. Grítale a la masa. No sé, no feel in control. Piensa en el futuro. Let the time find for yourself. Ver un mundo nuevo. Well, there's nowhere else to go. Woo! No, yo no sé qué pasa. I don't know what's going on. Grítale a la masa. No sé, no feel in control. Piensa en el futuro. Let the time find for yourself. Ver un mundo nuevo. Where there's nowhere else to go. Yo no sé qué pasa. I don't know what's going on. Grítale a la masa. No sé, no feel in control. Piensa en el futuro. Let the time find for yourself. Ver un mundo nuevo. Where there's nowhere else to go. Where there's nowhere else to go. Yo no sé qué pasa. Where there's nowhere else to go. Where there's nowhere else to go. Yo no sé qué pasa. Where there's nowhere else to go. Yeah.
All right, thank you so much, Hassan, Adam, Roman, and Sebastian. This is Nice Wonder. You're watching the NOWMAN Show. I'm here with H Groove, and we're live on YouTube. Be present always. Mike Farrell is an actor, producer, writer, and activist who is best known for his role as B.J. Honeycutt in the iconic TV series MASH. He's produced a number of films, including Dominic and Eugene and Patch Adams, and appeared in the television series Providence on NBC and The Red Road on the Sundance Channel. He's the author of Just Call Me Mike, A Journey to Actor and Activist, and of Mule and Man. He stars in the play Dr. Keeling's Curve, a one-man show that was created by playwright and activist George Shea. And George Shea is in the house with us. He's an activist and a playwright, author of Dr. Keeling's Curve, a play about the life of Charles David Keeling. And we're going to be talking about Keeling and the play. Mike Farrell, George Shea, thank you very much for being on the NOWMAN Show.
Thank you. Pleasure, thank you.
George, I'll start with you. Where did you get the inspiration to write a play about a scientist?
Well, I'll tell you, it was a column in the New York Times, Tom Friedman, 2010, February 2010. And I'll just read you an excerpt from the column that inspired it. He says, although there remains a mountain of research from multiple institutions about the reality of climate change, the public has grown uneasy. What's real? The climate science community should convene its top experts from places like NASA, MIT, Stanford's, Caltech, and the UK Met Office Hadley Center, and produce a simple 50-page report. they could call it What We Know, summarizing everything we already know about climate change in language that a sixth grader could understand with unimpeachable peer-reviewed footnotes, and so on. He says at the same time they should add a summary of all the errors and wild exaggerations made by climate skeptics, and so on, where they get their funding. So, yeah, that struck me as a reasonable idea. Most people today, they're too busy, too intellectually lazy to read a 300-page book on the subject.
Yeah,
okay?
that's true.
It's true, yeah.
Yeah.
So, I read a bunch of them, and I thought to myself, I've written a lot of children's books. This could be a nice children's book about Keeling.
So that was the original idea.
That was the original
children's
idea.
book.
I couldn't find a publisher.
Yeah.
One guy said to me, "Nobody ever heard of this guy.
Yeah.
How am I going to sell? How am I going to sell books?" So I thought, well, okay. I'd done a one-man play already before, so I said I'll write a one-man show about Keeling. And then I thought, well, nobody will pay any attention to it if I play Keeling. And one day, one rainy, it was about 6 years ago, I was with my wife, and she said, we were walking around, she said, "Oh, it's Mike Farrell's house." I said, "Oh, really?" Yeah. And I turned around, I saw Mike taking out his garbage. And I said, God wants me to do this. So I ran up to him, and I said, "Mike, how do you feel about global warming?" And that started it.
That's fantastic. I didn't know that. That's great.
Yeah.
And Mike, at first you talked about it was not a play, right?
Well,
when he first brought the draft to you,
right? When George came up with the idea, I thought the idea was exciting and certainly necessary today. But I said, the big problem is it has to be a play.
Yes.
It can't be a lecture.
Right.
Because nobody's going to come listen to me lecture, nor are they going to come listen to you lecture about this subject. So George said, well, I've got an idea, let me see what I can do to flesh it out. And he did. We went back and forth, I think, over a few versions.
Yes.
All right. Oh,
and then finally I was working on a different show at a theater in Los Angeles, and I gave it to the director, and I said, I think you might find this interesting.
Is that the Blank Theater?
That was the Blank.
Yeah.
Right? And she did. She thought it was quite terrific. And so the three of us then began to collaborate on what needed to be fixed or how we could, emphasize one thing. And George, of course, is the walking encyclopedia now about climate change. But what he had to do was keep us up to date on all the new developments and the new signs that we were going to have to articulate to people, so that we were not talking about history, we're talking about what's happening today.
Yes. So, but it's the perfect connection, though, to start with the historical context.
Right.
And then as you do it live, you're updating the stats, the statistics, basically, which you have to do.
Yeah.
But you have to do more than that. You have to bring people to an understanding, with the history.
Yes.
That tells us that we're not just sort of making this up out of whole cloth, that this has been developing over many years. Scientific understanding has developed over many, many, many years. But even so, there are things that need to be brought up so that people sort of put it in a context. Because talk about global warming, and you can have Senator James Inhofe throwing a snowball on the floor of the Senate, and he said there's no such thing. The concept of global warming, which I think people politically have decided to call climate change, is something that although we are now finding every year getting warmer, and some people are saying, oh, they did talk about global warming, didn't they?
Yes.
But I think what it needed was relevance. It needed relevance to our lives today, and George was able to do that.
Yeah, brilliantly. A lot of people can learn about who this person was. And actually, didn't he start his career right down the street here at Caltech?
Yes, he did, yeah.
Yeah. How long was he here?
He was here about, not that long, actually. It was one of those accidents. A lot of discoveries are accidents.
Yeah.
Keeling just wanted to get out of, he was given a job putting rocks into, they were trying to see if they could extract uranium from granite. Okay, he didn't want to do it.
He didn't want to do that.
Anyway.
Yeah, he called it the dungeon, right? Where they wanted
Exactly,
to send him to the dungeon.
Yeah, so he thought to himself, if I can get out of doing this, find something more stimulating. And he overheard a conversation his professor was having about CO2.
Yeah.
And he ran up to him and he said, I'm not sure I agree with you. And that started it. But the thing about the play about Keeling is if you can tell the story of Keeling's life and work, you can explain climate change to people. And you put a human face on it, Mike Farrell's.
Yeah.
And yeah, it does work.
And it also, the point of making it a play and not a lecture is just that. So people identify. People meet this guy.
Right.
Who nobody, you know, most people hadn't, except in the scientific community, most people hadn't heard of. But you meet him, you hear about his meeting his wife, you hear about the development of his family. So people are then pulled into it because it's somebody they can recognize and sort of take a ride with.
Yeah.
You're creating his personality and you're bringing that out
right.
in the play so that people can make a human connection to it
Exactly.
while they're learning what is actually the storyline actually is.
Which is the whole point of theater, identification.
Right,
If you
exactly.
identify, then you can take that ride. If you don't, you sit back and you say, oh, I'm sorry, I'm bored, goodbye.
Exactly. And speaking of that, you interjecting some humor to make that relevant, and that shows a great writer right there, by the way.
Well.
You did a great job with that.
Thank you.
For doing that, speaking for myself personally. Now, let's look at Keeling himself. Now, when he first started, did he come up with this parts per million thing?
Oh no, that preceded him.
Yeah.
He knew nothing about carbon dioxide.
Oh, he didn't?
No, this is 1953, okay? CO2, people thought of Coca-Cola. That was about it.
Yeah, that's
serious.
right.
Yeah.
That's right.
So he figured, well, I'll see what work has been done. He surveyed the work that most of it was being done in Sweden. Matter of fact, all of it in Scandinavia.
Wow.
And he decided pretty quickly that it was totally disorganized. You know, they were taking readings all over the place, using different equipment, different technicians. And he came up with his own methodology, which was remarkably simple. First, you have to collect an air sample. So he invented a flask to do that. And then you have to measure it.
Yep.
And he discovered this thing called a manometer and adapted it. And that was it. He was off and running. But it took him, I think anyone else probably would have done the experiment in like a week. Keeling took a year.
Wow.
Yeah.
He was really a perfectionist. He wanted to understand that it was in fact happening, and he wanted to see how what the process was.
Yeah.
And that's, you know, one of the great things about the guy, and it's something many people I think identify with, is what drove him west and what drove him into science was his love of the outdoors, particularly mountains.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he was he liked the science in nature.
Oh yeah.
Which all of us do really.
Sure.
When we're young, that's when we first understand that, hey, you know, you go to a river, you go to the beach, or you you make that connection automatically, and it arouses. You know, what makes this happen? How does this work?
Yeah.
And that's where it starts.
He didn't realize though right away that the CO2 was going up. That could be a problem. And then he discovered quickly that all the afternoon readings showed the same number, 310 ppm. He went all over California, all over the West, even on the East Coast. Everywhere it was the same number.
Hawaii too?
Yeah.
When he eventually went to.
Oh, sure. It's the same all over the planet.
Yeah.
And that was a startling discovery.
Yeah.
Could it be that the number is the same all over the world?
Yeah.
And if so, what does that mean? Well, what we found out is it means that it's rising and that we are in danger as a result of that rise.
And of course, just like any other scientific study, it takes years to really have enough data to be able to project forward, which is what he did. And he did this during the course of the 1950s and 1960s, correct?
He did it the rest of the next 50 years. He did it until his death in 2005.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So he continued to do it
He was
then.
still measuring. Yeah.
And there were just other people doing it too.
Not enough.
Not enough.
Some.
No,
Yeah.
He was very guarded about that.
He was very, I see.
Yeah.
That would make sense.
The government wanted to start its own program, and he resisted that for years. And finally, he gave in. NOAA wanted to do it. This was in the 90s. And the guy in charge of the program had worked for him. So he knew he must have been okay.
Well, that makes sense, right?
Yeah.
You want to make sure that it's pure science and that you're getting real data.
Yeah.
And that's the important piece. It wasn't wanting to protect his own discovery. It wasn't about selfishness. It was really about protecting the science and making absolutely sure that everything measured up as it began to appear clear to him that it was the case. And then, how do you measure it? And how, besides going out and getting vacuum tubes full of oxygen, he discovered or came up with the idea of investigating how to get old oxygen out of ice cores.
Wow.
Oh, yeah.
The permafrost? Is that,
Yeah.
He was also involved in that?
Indeed.
Yeah.
Really? I
Was
did
in
not.
the,
Wow.
around 1980.
Phenomenal.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's I learn things all the time.
Yeah, they
you know?
discovered there were bubbles inside the ice cores they'd never been able to get inside. There was CO2 in there. And they analyzed the CO2. They discovered an almost perfect correlation between CO2 and temperatures. In the past, thousands of years ago, as CO2 levels went up, temperatures went up with them.
Mm-hmm.
As they went down, same story. Temperatures went down. So he realized, and it sounds bizarre, but CO2 acts like a thermostat for climate on this planet.
That's amazing.
And was it your line or was it his, the miniature ice museums? Or was it
miniature ice
I love that idea.
Yeah.
That inside, this discovery that inside these ice cores were these little tiny museums that you could break open and move into if they could figure out how to do it. Up until he and his son went to Switzerland, right?
That's where they did
worked
work.
with a French team.
Right.
They discovered how to capture the oxygen inside and measure it.
Wow.
See, the idea that CO2 is the same all over the planet is true, but that's only in nature. And that was Keeling's take. That was the thought he had, because he wanted to do science in nature.
So the government probably was very interested in his studies then, or not?
No.
No, not really, no? No.
They canceled his program in 1960, the end of 1963.
Wow.
There were 3 months in early 1964 where there were no measurements of CO2.
Yeah.
Kennedy wanted to send astronauts to the moon, and it was
the
very
reason.
expensive. And I'll say this, I'll just interject this, but I really wonder if we're going to hear a lot of talk about going to Mars, and that's really what we should be doing. You know, it's a huge distraction. Frankly, I think it's a fantasy, but.
Well, I think it sounds more like it's a distraction.
Oh, yeah,
Knowing,
sure.
because the bottom line is we're talking about political economics.
Absolutely right. And we've got big businesses out there whose existence is based on fossil fuels.
Mm-hmm.
And if it is in fact the fossil fuels that are creating this global warming or this climate change, call it what you like, that spells doom for them, and they don't want that to be the case. So you've got this actually a cult of deniers. Some of them are paid big bucks to come up with negative information to poo-poo the idea of global warming or climate. Oh yeah, fake news.
Mm-hmm. That's what it is.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
You know, and we should call it what it is, in my view, because there's, you know, like we've been talking, and we're going to continue talking in another episode. You know, there's plenty of data. There's no need for denial or to call something a hoax.
Well, when you have the IPCC, this international group of scientists, 97-3 maintaining that global warming is a very real phenomenon and it is dangerous.
Yes.
It seems to me that the arrogance of those people in the denialist camp is phenomenal.
And what is this? Wasn't there was something in the news this week? There was an Associated Press story, and I saw it in the LA Times. I think online it was even on the New York Times link. 3 members of the Reagan-era cabinet.
Sure.
Did they have a meeting with the senior advisor in the White House, or do we know what's going on?
They had a
there?
meeting this past week. I don't know what the result was. But about 3 years ago, Henry Paulson put out a study called the Risky Business Report.
What is that?
Well, very simply, if climate change really takes off, you won't be able to do business. Okay? They see it as a threat to business. And that makes sense. I mean, I've heard climate scientists say to me, I don't think anything's really going to change until the business community realizes it's a threat to their business.
So, but can it transition into a more green economy?
We have to. Yeah.
I mean, how is that going to happen? I mean, we're seeing in Germany and places like that where, you know, they don't even have nearly as much sun as we do here in California. And so obviously it can be done with just solar, but there's also wind, there's also geothermal.
Sure.
You know,
But you know, you mentioned the economic imperative.
Yeah.
If business wants to make a profit, if they can find out that they can make not only a profit, but continue to the existence of
Yes.
people on this planet
That's right.
through this process of green economies, green businesses, figuring out how to use geothermal and solar and all the alternative technologies that are available to us, instead of this insistent reliance on fossil fuels, then there's hope.
Yeah.
And the contradictions, you know, like for instance, I think in Texas, for instance, you know, while they're working on wind technology for power, they're still doing the fracking, which is you know, it's like saying you're not in denial of climate change, but let's still keep the fracking. This is the insanity of the system,
Right.
where you know, where economic. Where political economics really has to be talked about and examined, and like, look, there are other ways of doing this. We have a serious crisis here.
Yeah, but that's an important point, but it's not one that's going to be well met by the heads of ExxonMobil, for example.
Exactly.
One of whom is now our Secretary of State.
I know, and that we're definitely going to get into that in another episode, and with some scientists as well, to discuss more of these kinds of details and what can be done. But speaking of what can be done, we're citizens activists, and we can talk about it too from our perspective. So in your perspectives, what can we do now to raise the awareness or just bring it to more people's attention?
Well, something we can do is join the Citizens Climate Lobby. I was at a meeting of the Citizens Climate Lobby this morning, and some people from NASA, JPL are there. Basically, we lobby our members of Congress. I've been to the representative in Congress a number of times. Once a year, they go down to Washington, they lobby every member of Congress. They're reaching out to Republicans. Right now, we have something like at least a dozen Republicans who have members of Congress who are willing to you know, join a statement about reach across the aisle, climate change. And that's it. But they want to get the message out, and they want to find a realistic way to get what they call a carbon fee and dividend. The idea is they would put a carbon fee on fossil fuels, and they would start it out fairly low at like $15 a ton, and then they'd gradually increase it, and the money would not go to the government. All right, that would keep the Republicans happy. They would send a check to basically to every American, sort of like the way you'd get a tax refund.
So maybe a family of four would get a couple grand or something a year.
Something like that.
Yeah.
But for those people who aren't activists, for those people who aren't willing to go out and invest themselves, their time and their energy into joining an organization that is doing this kind of work, there is this play.
Yeah.
There is this play, and the play's been done now at a number of places here on the West Coast, and one in Arizona, and we did one in Arkansas. And it's now on DVD, and hopefully we can use this as a teaching tool for people who are interested in having a good experience watching a little over an hour on television, but or sit in an audience at a university or wherever we can do it, to be captured by this idea that this guy like you and me, who stumbled into something because he was curious and because he was in love with nature and because he had this kind of scientific bent, realized what was happening and brought it to the attention of the scientific community in a way that has now exploded. Hopefully not
How
in
can,
a destructive way.
Exactly. And so people can go online and find this?
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
Matter of fact, it's on HD YouTube right now.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, gentlemen, for being on the NOWMAN Show. I'm here with George Shea and Mike Farrell, and you're watching the NOWMAN Show.
Now, most of you have never heard of Dave Keeling, which is just fine with me. And don't take this personally, but being here talking to you is not my idea of a good time. I'm here because I love this planet. I had a family, children, grandchildren, and I loved them deeply. Still do. So I can't stand quietly by and watch everyone and everything I care about, including our civilization, suffer a grueling, painful, completely unnecessary catastrophe. There's nothing inherently evil about CO2. Relatively speaking, there's really not that much of it in the air, way less than 1%. But ounce for ounce, it's very powerful stuff. Like greed. Greed, speaking of the 1%. One day, around the 4th grade, we got a new teacher. This teacher began telling us that the phases of the moon were caused by eclipses. By the moon passing between the Earth and the sun. Huh? I was horrified. I raised my hand. She ignored me. Finally, she kept going. I couldn't stand it. I stood up. I said, Miss Spencer, that's wrong. That's not true. You're talking about an eclipse. That's wrong. She gave me a look, told me to sit down and shut up.
Thank you, first of all, for the warm welcome. Dr. West and I were here earlier today for those who were around. And we promised to come back, and here we are. We came back a second time today. And we came back a second time. I want to be very brief and let Dr. West say a word. I know there are others who haven't spoken yet, and I feel like we're monopolizing because we've been here twice again already today. Yeah. We appreciate it. Dr. West and I came back tonight because he was on Anderson Cooper on CNN, and he insisted that they take him live from this protest. So Dr. West was just on CNN on the corner right there with you as the backdrop, and that was a great picture. And then we both appeared together on Keith Olbermann. We just came off a Keith show on Current TV. And so we're doing everything we can to try to get this message out. I believe as a member of the media on public television, especially on public television and public radio, it is my mission, it's my mandate, it's my calling, my vocation, my purpose to try to get Americans who don't get this to re-examine the assumptions they hold. My job is to try to help them to expand their inventory of ideas. My job on public TV and public radio is to try to get them to look at this country and the crisis of this country through a different prism. That's the job that I try to do every day on public TV and public radio. So I'm always honored to be a part of a struggle that's trying to get America to wrestle with its own demons, wrestle with its own challenges, its own crises. I want to just share with you, when Dr. West and I appeared on Keith's show just a moment ago on Current Television, one of the questions that he asked us, because this critique is moving around the country, that this movement is 99% white. Exactly. And Dr. West and I we just pushed back on that lie on national television. This is multicultural, this is multiracial, this is multi-ethnic. This protest is a microcosm of this city, and it's a microcosm of this country. Y'all didn't clap loud enough on that. And I just came back right quick to say, for those of us who live and work, or who live and are trying to work in this so-called city of the angels, I came back to say that if we are serious about taking our future into our own hands, when persons, I know we're streaming live right now, so I'm talking to folk right now who are not here. Folk who are not here right now, but know that they're catching hell. Know that they can't find a job. Know that they can't afford their student loans. Know that they're living back home with their mom and them. Know that they don't have access to health care, etc., etc., etc. If you have a legitimate grievance, this is where you need to be. I said to Keith when Keith asked whether or not there was a problem with the fact that the movement at the moment doesn't have a cohesive or coherent message, that there isn't a laundry list of demands. I said, who said I like this right here. But who said that there aren't a variety of legitimate grievances here at this protest about jobs, about getting out of Iraq and Afghanistan, about access to health care, et cetera, et cetera. So there are a lot of issues here, a lot of legitimate grievances, and I'm convinced that if we keep making enough noise, somebody's got to start asking questions about what does matter to us. The worst thing you can do to a human being is to make him or her feel invisible, to make them feel disposable, to make them feel like they're a calculation or they are an afterthought. And there's too much of that in this country. The humanity of too many people is being contested every day. What we are fighting against is the contestation of the humanity of too many Americans of all races, colors, creeds, etc. So I came back tonight to talk to CNN and to talk to Keith and of course my own show on PBS and on NPR and PRI, but to try to raise your voice through the voice and the platform that I have about how significant and how necessary this is. So I celebrate your courage, I celebrate your conviction, I celebrate your commitment, I celebrate your character for being out here. And for all those watching on this live stream right now, this is the place you need to be. Our voices have to be heard, our grievances have to be raised.
Hello. Hello, this is Nice Wonder, and welcome to the NOWMAN Show. And we are live on YouTube. Frantz Pierre. In the early 90s, he attended John Jay College in New York. And John Jay is widely regarded as part of the Ivy League tier of criminal justice schools in the U.S., on par with Harvard and Stanford. He moved to Los Angeles in 2003 to build a blossoming career in the entertainment industry areas of film, music, and fashion. The main issue on Mr. Pierre's mind is, of course, homelessness. He is a regular volunteer at homeless shelters and seeks to make life better for the city's homeless, whose suffering he has witnessed firsthand. He was an occupier at Occupy Wall Street and Occupy Los Angeles. He also started the Occupy Hollywood movement, an extension of OWS. Mr. Pierre is an active member of the cooperative movement. He's also a universal basic income advocate, an artist manager, a fashion designer, and he's dedicated to putting the people of Los Angeles first and emphasizing education, environment, health, and people over profits. Mr. Pierre seeks to bring economic and social justice and innovation to Los Angeles so that more citizens can live better lives. Wow. And that's almost on par, exactly 100% with where I'm coming from. So it's great to have you on the show.
It is my pleasure, and thank you for having me.
Oh, awesome. Now you grew up in Haiti, right?
Yes, born, raised, and grew up there, yes. Wow. And that's where I started activism when I was 15,
wow,
fighting against baby duck.
Oh, really?
Yeah, that's how I got started in activism.
Wow.
So, and then I moved to the States. I moved to the United States, and I get into, I was an anti-rape activist. I'm still am, to be honest to you. And I used to live in New York. And yeah, then I learned about nonviolence because I didn't know about nonviolence growing up in Haiti. It was about, violent protest, so.
Yeah, it's a whole different mindset.
Yes, yes. So I've learned a lot when I moved to the States.
Yes, a totally different culture from what I know that you were used to.
Yes.
Now, first of all, we brought you here mainly to talk about universal basic income, but there's obviously a lot of things to connect to that. So let's get right into it. And we've talked about that subject on this show before, but really haven't gone into more detail, right? So let's start with the very basics here. What is universal basic income?
The very basic explanation is that it's basically there to get people out of poverty, to help people to meet their basic needs. Food, shelter, and clothing. That's it. Opponents of basic income, they try to make a lot of big things out of it. So it's basically there to help us, the people who are living in poverty. So with that, we strongly believe that basic income can definitely eliminate poverty. If one define poverty as those who have a problem financially, cannot afford the basic needs, that's how we define poverty. So in that context, yes, basic income can eliminate poverty.
And that's a great place to start this discussion because, one of the reasons why we got involved in Occupy, as you saw, we have a clip of Tavis Smiley from Occupy LA, and I brought actually a couple of books here. Noam Chomsky's Occupy, and then this is also a book called The Economic Elite, the People versus the People of the United States of America. It's David DeGraw, who wrote the blogs that got Adbusters and Anonymous's attention. And they created, of course, the 99% movement and Occupy Wall Street. I do have to bring that up, not just because it's the 6th anniversary of that event, but it actually often and still does get downplayed, and yet it made an incredible impact in the awareness of people to the economic inequality.
Right.
And it turned it into many places all over the world where people could go to a public space and actually have this discussion. And economists like Richard Wolff have even said, to me, that was the first time that ever happened since the 1930s. So that's a big deal.
It is. And also during the Occupy movement, we also talk about universal basic income and worker cooperatives. We were also addressing these important issues as well. And unfortunately, the Occupy movement faded. So was the talk about universal basic income and worker co-ops. And now we are, it's back, in the media. A lot of people in Silicon Valley, they are leading that conversation about universal basic income. So
yeah, as a matter of fact, I have seen various clips. I mean, people from all across different perspectives and political ideologies. I mean, I've seen, well, I haven't seen it on the far right, but I've seen Robert Reich talk about it. I've seen Stephen Hawking, Bill Gates, Elon Musk mention it. Mark Zuckerberg mentioned it. And of course, one of my favorites, Yanis Varoufakis, former finance minister of Greece. They've all brought it up in talks.
Yeah, and I have a feeling it is because the left is talking about it, so the right, But I have a feeling a lot of right people support it. Of course, we have Nixon.
Right, that's right. That's right. Nixon discussed it. That's
right. And in fact, if it was up to Nixon, we will have a version of basic income at this time. It was because of the left, that they knock it down, because they said, Nixon was not offering enough money, and then they wanted to be the left wanted to be the one to do it.
Yes, that's true.
So that's what destroyed during the Nixon time.
Now, did Nixon get that idea from Dr. Martin Luther King? Because he talked about it.
Possibly.
Yeah.
Possibly. And but we know his version was more like the negative income tax. That was basically which is great, But I'm pushing for universal basic income. Which is. So the negative income is a form of basic income. So they have different versions. That's why.
So there's different versions. Try to break that down for us, because so we understand. Because most people are starting to hear about UBI now. Using the acronym Universal Basic Income, but there's different types, right? Can you explain that?
Yeah, there are different types, and then even within these types, it's divided per like. I have a belief, for universal basic income. This is one I support, where everyone has it. Everyone will receive it, regardless, children, from children to all the way to elderly people, they will receive it. Even within that group, there are people who said, okay, we want an UBI plus. What that means is that we will keep the welfare programs the way it is.
Yes.
So we will put universal basic income in addition to that. I do not support that. I support we should food stamp, for instance. I believe we should get rid of food stamp Social Security, I believe we should keep Social Security. But there are some other groups, they believe that we should get rid of Social Security. You know, so it's different. So, you know, it's like when we're talking about universal basic income, everyone have to explain, you know, where they stand on certain aspect of universal basic income.
Well,
so
now
that
don't
is
they
very
call
important.
food stamps now? They don't really call them food stamps. They call it WIC or SNAP or
something.
There's different types of programs for different types of people. So what you're saying basically is there's advocacy to not get rid of those, and there's advocacy to get rid of certain programs, and there's advocacy to keep everything and add universal basic income to that.
Yes,
right?
Yes. So it's basically, you know, each person, you know, you have to basically ask them, okay, where do you stand on certain issue?
Now, are they proposing different amounts different monthly amounts, no cap, or, you know, no, like for instance, there's a pilot program in Finland right now that's working pretty well.
Very well.
It seems to me that the only people that, well, the articles that I've read, right, it's working very well for the entrepreneur types, the unemployed, students looking for work, you know, still in school, whatever. And it seems like the people complaining about it, look to me, they didn't come out and say it exactly, but it looks to me like it's capitalists that are complaining about it.
But you know, when it comes to like experiment and pilots, you know, some people they like judging them pretty hard. You know, it's a pilot. You know,
yes.
It's give them room. If they're talking about implementation,
right,
you know, then that's where we're like, okay, is it a basic income? You know, just because they're giving unemployment individual a certain money does not mean that it is basic income, to be honest to you.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
So if it's a pilot experiment, I don't think they should judge them pretty harsh. You know, let's see the implementation of it. You know, so Finland, I think the way they're doing is great, and it is already reducing stress. It's working already, you know. And
yes.
Basically, each and every pilot that has been done, an experiment, it has proven to work.
Yes.
You know, it changed people's life for the better.
That's right.
You know, and these the studies, they are there for anyone. They can go and look at them and do their own research. And then they will come up with the same conclusion.
That's right.
You know, and you will find that opponents of universal basic income, they will not go, when they are talking about against basic income, they don't bring up pilots and experiments.
Yes.
They stay away from that, you know. But then, you know, when they do that, I question their motive.
Yes.
When they you know, fail to mention pilots and experiments. Yeah, so basically Finland is a good example, and it is working.
It is working, and I mean, I know artists love it, so I'm sure that we would love it, right?
Definitely. And also, one thing most people don't know about universal basic income, it was implemented before. It's not just the pilots, it was implemented, and
where at?
It's the city of Medina in Saudi Arabia.
Really?
It's been a long time. You know, we're talking about like
when was that?
Right after the death of Prophet Muhammad, his successor Abu Bakr. He was the first one who implemented universal basic income.
Really?
Yes, we're talking about 632 AD, but he was the first Muslim caliph. Unfortunately, he lasted only 2 years. He passed away, but the program remained. The implementation lasted for about almost 100 years, 80-something years.
Really?
Yes. So the reason why it ended, there were two reasons actually. One, there are some government issues, you know, and then they couldn't find anyone in the city of Medina who needed a basic income.
Really?
So it was truly a city with no poverty. So that's how it ended.
So it was actually a program that maybe lifted anybody that was in poverty, lifted them out of poverty.
Out of poverty.
So then it didn't really serve a purpose anymore. See,
right,
if people would think about that
that actually accomplishes something on that level, then maybe they would consider it. Thank you for sharing that, because we actually have historical context to put that in.
Yes,
right?
again, it's been a long time ago.
Yeah. Well, still,
but
I mean, some things are basic. When you're talking about basic necessities, I mean, you know, back at that time, just like today, people need to eat.
Yes.
Right? You need a shelter. You need basic necessities. Those very basic fundamental things don't change. The ways they're outpictured or created.
Good
That's,
point.
you
Good
know,
point.
It's
Yes.
the same thing. So for those people that are skeptical or just have a lot of fear, a lot of questions, I mean, you know, there's critics, right? As you know.
Yes.
And there are critics that will say things like, you know, well, it's just going to make a bunch of people lazy, right? If you give them free money, right? There's that assumption. But there's also this other assumption from other groups. They're saying like, well, we're going to have to redo the government before we implement anything like that, because the privatization, the private companies, they're going to want to get their hands all over that, and it's not going to work, and that's part of the plan, so they can make profits and make it look efficient, so that you know, make it more difficult to implement it again. So, you know, and I understand both of these concerns, but how do you address those kinds of questions if people ask you that?
The critics, they will say they'll make people lazy. But if you ask them, okay, if you receive $1,500 a month, you know, will you stop working? They will tell you no. They will continue to work.
Right.
You know, but when you ask them about the other guy, they say, yeah, the other guy will stop working. So it's never them. It's always the other guy.
Right.
That's
right. So it's an ego thing.
Right. You know, they're probably thinking about their uncle or somebody in the family. You know, sure. I don't think people are inherently lazy.
Right.
Just because you know, if they don't want to do something, they're not going to do it. But if they receive the money, if they got $1,500 a month, that would motivate them to do the things that they love to do. You know, so if you allow someone to do something they love to do, they're not going to be lazy. They're going to be motivated. You know, just like let's look at food stamp. They said, you know, food stamp makes people lazy and things like. It's not enough. You know, well, the cash part. It's not enough money to motivate someone to go out there and do something, even if they want to open a business.
That's right.
Whereas
it's got to be significant.
It got to be significant. So that is very important when it comes to.
And does that get based on, like, you know, because the cost of living is different, like let's say in Los Angeles than it would be in Des Moines, Iowa, or Lincoln, Nebraska? Would they calculate it based on the regionalized or the localized cost of living? Is that?
I hope they do, because some you know supporter of basic income, they said, you know, nationwide they want to give $1,000 a month.
Yeah.
But $1,000 a month is not going to cut it in LA.
No.
You know, maybe somewhere like you're talking about deep in somewhere in the south.
Right.
You know, it will work, but not in LA.
I totally agree.
Yes, and for in LA, I believe, you know, between 1,300 and 1,500 will work for us in Los Angeles. So in that context, I believe, okay, if the country want to give people $1,000, the state and the city should work together, you know, and give people the additional $300 or $500. You know, I think that way it will work.
And the benefits to the economy. I mean, we already see that, you know, with what social safety nets we have left, that people actually, when they get money, they spend it.
Yes.
Even if they're not working. But there's also this other thing, too, of the creation of wealth. I mean, we're all working in some capacity or another. If you don't have a paycheck, that doesn't mean you're not working. And that doesn't mean that you're not productive, you know. And some of us know from experience that that's true. And if you want to ask us about it, we will gladly talk to you about it off camera.
Another good thing, since you mentioned work, another good thing about basic income, it helps us to redefine work. What is work?
Yes.
You know,
what actually is work?
You know, so you help us to redefine that, because you have people, they volunteer the time, you know, to do things. You know,
totally.
It's not about money. You know, these people need to get paid as well.
That's right.
You know?
Why should people volunteer for free? That kind of stuff is becoming a problem in this country, to be honest with you, because it's showing that many people can be productive, but they're not getting paid for it.
Right.
And that's another conversation that we should really have.
Yeah, and if they're receiving the basic income, that will motivate them more to even do more volunteer work.
That's right.
You know, so
that would actually motivate them to want to, and then they could follow their passions.
Yes.
And then that's when you follow your passions, then that's when you really are productive and you contribute to your community.
And another thing, basic income opponents, when they're talking about people being lazy, they're not looking at the people who are volunteering doing the work. You know,
right.
So they ignore these people. So just you know, it's like, here's the thing about universal basic income. Universal basic income understands that there'll be some people who probably will sit at home doing nothing. You know, but basic income doesn't see these people. It sees, you know, it sees the good in people. You know,
That's
there's
right.
people who are going to volunteer to do work. The people who are going to use the money to open businesses. You know, and according to a study, when we're looking at domestic violence, according to the study, most people stay in abusive relationship because of a lack of income.
Right.
So if they receive a basic income, I'm not saying that it's going to help each and every one of them, but even if it helps 1%, get 1% of victims out of a relationship, you know, that's success.
That's right.
So that's another reason I support universal basic income.
And let's kind of wrap this up, start to wrap it up anyway, because I want to talk to you a little bit about worker cooperatives.
Yes.
And now, have you ever heard of the book called Utopia for Realists?
Yes.
Yeah.
By Roger, yes.
Yeah, by Rutger Bregman?
Yes,
yeah, yeah.
That's it.
He's another advocate for this. And
yes.
You know, and actually, you can go online and see a great interview he did with a former guest on our show, Matt Orfala. And that's another way to get some more information about this subject matter.
And then he did a TED Talk as well.
He did a TED Talk as
yes,
well.
Yes, that was a great one,
well.
and I
yes.
encourage people to watch it.
Yeah, and he talks about BS jobs, and there are a lot of them out there, and there are a lot of also jobs that are as during the Obama administration. There were 94% of the jobs were part-time. Mm-hmm. They were temporary gigs or low-wage full-time gigs with little or no benefits. 94%, yeah. And that's to say, okay, we created 50 million jobs. Yeah, but you have to look at more statistics.
What kind of yeah. What kind of jobs are we talking about? You know.
And worker cooperatives is another way too. It's not just a business model, but it's also a movement. Because it challenges the way you look at the economy. Now we've talked about that a lot on this show, and we'll continue to do so because some of the production involved in this show involves a worker cooperative.
Yeah, and then just like universal basic income, worker co-ops is nothing new. In fact, Benjamin Franklin, the founding father, he had a worker co-op.
Oh, he did?
Co-ops. Yes, it was an insurance company.
Really?
I believe, yeah. I think it was in Pennsylvania somewhere. The plate of the business still exists.
Really?
So it's been there for a while.
Oh, that's fantastic.
It is, and that is something, of course, I support. And in fact, I intend to start a lot of worker co-ops businesses.
You have started one, haven't you?
Yes, I started one. It's for housing cleaning because I started with that one because it requires less capital.
Oh, yes, that's true.
To get started.
Are you modeling it after the one in Brooklyn?
Yes, they have one in Oakland, in San Francisco, and in New York, and so we are the first one in Los Angeles. So it's eco-friendly house cleaning.
Fantastic.
So that's where we should be heading. Because it creates wealth. It's good for our community, and we should define worker co-ops.
Yes.
So basically, it has the two main characteristics. Is that the first one, employees own the business. And they share the profits.
That's right.
So that's
the surplus.
Or the surplus, like we like to call it within the co-op movement. We prefer to say surplus than profits. Correct.
Right. To distinguish it from a capitalist organization, which is part of the movement, the political part.
Yes, definitely. So it's. When they own the business, they have an incentive to do better work.
That's right. That's right.
And then if we're talking about worker co-ops, we have to talk about Mondragon.
Mondragon in Spain. Yes.
In Spain.
Yeah.
So they did a very good jobs, and they are the models that we want to follow.
And they have, last I saw, about 75,000 worker owners now in the Mondragon Cooperative Corporation.
Yes, yes. They have over 100,000, but 75,000 of them are worker-owned.
Yes,
worker owners.
Yes. In 2017.
Yes.
Because they did get affected by the economic downturn, unfortunately.
That is true.
The flagship Fagor, I think it is, which is an appliance factory. They cut back, and then they apparently didn't survive the economic crisis, which, by the way, folks, for most of us is still going on. We didn't get recovery from 2008. Hello. And so brace yourself, because another one's probably on its way, another downturn. So, but
yeah, they did have a downturn, but also if you're looking at like Spain,
yes,
you know, it's, you know, I think I forgot the number, but Mondragon was very, very less than other companies.
They stayed, you know, I mean, they're still like the 7th largest corporation, I think, in Spain.
Yes.
So,
yes.
And obviously, you know, as a worker owner, I know that feeling. Arete Media Productions was official June the 1st, 2017.
Congratulations.
Thank you very much. We're media production and education company. That's where our focus is. So,
awesome.
The NOWMAN Show is a part of that, and I'm proud to say it's great to work with a fun group of guys. The intro of this show was our first project together, so the new intro, I should say, starting here in season 3. So it's a lot of fun. It's relationship based. We put each other first, and money is second.
Yes, yes.
Or even less than that. It's people first, always.
Yeah.
And it's also a mindset. So, you know, in a capitalist structure, it doesn't work like that. As a matter of fact, the stockholders are more important than the customers, let alone the employees.
Yeah,
so.
And those who support to put people before profits, they should definitely support worker co-ops, because that's what worker co-ops do. You know, definitely put people before profits. You know, that's what we're fighting for. You know, we should definitely go for it. You know, that's a way to destroy capitalism.
That's right, which we will get into. We're going to do a panel discussion as well. So tell us, let's wrap this up. Tell us where people can learn more about the basic income, and let's start with that first.
Sure. Any Google search can get you to basic income. There's a Reddit page for basic income, and we have a group in Los Angeles, Basic Income Los Angeles.
Now, how can they find you?
They can go to basicincomela.com. That's one. And for worker co-ops, they can look at our business. It's eco-friendly. Eco-friendly house cleaning la.com.
Excellent. We'll put those links in the closing credits as well. So, Frantz, thank you so much for being on the NOWMAN Show. Let's continue this conversation.
Definitely.
This is Nice Wander. I'm here with Frantz Pierre from Basic Income LA, and much, much more. And you're watching the NOWMAN Show. We're live on YouTube. Thanks for watching. Until next time, be present always. The NOWMAN Show, and I am here at Politicon with Ed Asner and Christina Tobin. And first of all, Ed Asner is, of course, a TV, film, voiceover actor, as well as a longtime activist. And Christina Tobin is the founder of Free and Equal Incorporated. We're going to get into what all this is all about and talk about where we are right now in political and economic crisis in this country. So thank you very much for joining us, and it's an honor to have you both here. For those of you who might not know Mr.
Asner's career, he's won multiple Emmys, television programs such as Mary Tyler Moore and Lou Grant. We played the same character.
The checkered one.
The checkered one, yeah. Though that's what the Hollywood Reporter would say, right? Yeah. And for those younger, if you're into animation, he was also the voice you heard in Up, which was also an Academy Award-winning film recently. And Christine has been involved, well, we can talk in more detail.
With me.
You can explain it, yeah. How you've been involved in third parties and supporting independence, etc. First of all, you just finished a talk here, Blake, and I have a quote here of you said, "We are living a lie. Our day of reckoning is now here." Can you elaborate on that?
Did she say that or did I?
You said that.
Oh, I can't believe I said that.
I don't know.
We got it on tape. So.
Yeah,
I'm sure.
Yeah.
It's a printing error. Well, we are living a lie, don't you think?
Yeah.
We are in a facade.
Because we don't represent the people that we have in this country. Our voting percentages are sucky.
Yeah.
They're sucky. And we keep finding, in this particular case, the Republicans keep creating voting machine problems, question the constant gerrymandering of districts, both locally and statewide, and unless the people rise up and say enough, because we're even corrupting the courts now.
That's right.
And this latest edition, what's his name? Strange name. To the
Scaramucci?
No,
Oh.
not that joker. The latest justice, Supreme Court justice. What's his name? See, what kind of Americans are you? You don't even know.
Yeah, I know.
About to replace them all in.
Yeah, I know. There's so many that. But you know,
It is an illusion, though.
It is an
I
illusion.
agree, a facade that we've been living in. That just the reality is that the two-party system has not been serving we, the people. And so until and when we rise together as a nation, as a world, as a country world, that's when we're going to bring about real change, believing in change and hope. That's where we stand at with Ed and being a supporter of Free and Equal Elections Foundation, which I founded, but it's for the people. This foundation's for you guys. And so that's really, consciousness is rising. And
Yes.
We are seeing what's real, what isn't real. And that's why we're here today with media like you. We find you to be real media,
Yes.
telling the real truth of the people out there. So, and Ed as well, Bill's joining us for that.
You think America should rule the world?
No.
No.
I think that the people should maybe come together and really not allow narcissistic,
Well, you're supposed to have a thing
sociopathic
called the UN
politicians
for
to run
that.
our country.
Isn't
The
that
UN's
what-
not something.
UN's not going to do that.
Then what do you want to create that's going to be better than the UN?
Free and equal elections. Article 1, Section 3 of
And
the
you're going to be able to
Constitution.
see that it's done throughout the world.
All elections shall be free and equal, yes. But we've got to fix the United States of America first.
What about
The whole world's
proportional
watching us.
representation? Does that enter into fair and equal?
Yes.
Yes.
Free and equal elections, proportional representation, I feel is
Ranked
probably
choice voting.
alternative voting methods are solutions. So many people are talking about all the problems, the left and right, the divide. A lot of panels here
Yeah.
at Politicon
Yeah.
are that way. But I think more in the future are going to be about uniting and solutions and coming together. So definitely going in that direction.
But you know, one of the things that you don't see in Europe, which we see here, is like Citizens United, which opened the floodgates to private money coming into our process. You know, I've interviewed people even on this show that will tell me, like in the Netherlands, for instance, lobbying money, private money going into the government is actually illegal, and you go to prison. And yet, it's the natural way of how business is done here. And obviously,
Why, the Netherlands is such a little country.
Oh.
And has leakage problems. We don't have any of that.
Oh. Do we?
Do you want to become the Netherlands? You're going to have to put up dams and dikes. Hmm?
Oh, that's true, eh?
You know?
Yeah, yeah.
You keep out the water.
Yeah.
Not fun.
That's not fun. Yeah,
And there ain't much profit in it either.
Yeah.
Well, maybe you can make an analogy that we're putting up dams and dikes to democracy here through the system that we have. That's why it's in a crisis.
Oh, but those are okay.
Because we have the Electoral College. Now, what is the plan to go through the electoral system institutionally? What have you proposed?
On the judicial side, last I checked, it's a two-party system
Right.
that
Yeah.
chooses who runs our judicial system, which is flawed. I mean, the fact that prison systems are primarily filled with people because of past possession of marijuana. I mean, there's so much greed and money, and then pharmaceutical, it's a whole nother thing. But as far as on the electoral side and institutionalized, I love that you brought up proportional representation. Talking about different alternative voting methods like score voting and approval voting, ranked choice voting, which is also known as instant runoff voting, which I think the Grammys used that. Maine just passed it.
really?
I see it spreading throughout the U.S. very quickly.
What's that, proportional?
Yes.
Proportional.
Yes, I mean, that is something very dear for over 10 years. I've been manifesting into free and equal elections. That's something I feel that would really
So you're
serve our
starting
elections.
your strategy at the grassroots level, state, local, regional.
Yes, real change. A wise man once taught me by the name of Mr. Ed Astor.
Oh, God.
At our
Not him
candidates
again.
forum in Cambria, California, where we're headquartered, real change starts from the bottom up.
Has to.
Gotta run for local office, and that's when we can get into the
You gotta
youth
get your
and
hands
getting
dirty.
That's
involved.
right. Well, you know, as far as third parties are concerned, there's the one I talked to Michael Feinstein,
Yeah, I know.
who is, he's been in the Green Party here in California since the
He was the mayor
1990s.
of
He was the
Santa
mayor of Santa Monica. Over 1,000.
Not the piano player.
No, not the different guy. Different guy. Yeah. People ask me that too, like, oh, the piano player. No, this is a different guy. He says that over 300 Greens have been elected to local offices in California alone, and over 1,000 nationwide since the 90s. And they do have, here and now, an infrastructure in place. Where, as you mentioned earlier, it's outrageous to have so much money just to get somebody on the ballot. What is that about?
Huh. That's ballot access. In the 1890s, I think through the Australian ballot, it came about where they decided we're going to require a certain amount of signatures for candidates to get on the ballot.
Yeah.
And it just sometimes, or often, or pretty much always, is more signatures for third parties and independent candidates. So that's more of the stranglehold, the rigged system that, yes, Trump and Sanders touched into, but they didn't go into it.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
back into the voting methods, the ballot access, the closed presidential debates, the
Yep.
Commission on Presidential Debates, and so on, gerrymandering. These are things that we will fix. We have to. The latter's not an option.
Well, it's so, the discussion about, alleged rigging, like for instance of the primary, 2016, the Democratic primary. I mean, what do you call superdelegates, for instance? Just that concept alone. How can you say that I'm voting before the actual election happens? It doesn't make any sense, And what is your take on that?
Well, that's a good, if you're super, you gotta flaunt it.
Yeah, I guess so. Like a superhero, right?
Gotta show who you are.
Yeah.
Why I oughta.
Who else is gonna call him super?
That's right.
I mean, when the election's over, they're gonna forget about the super. They're gonna.
Well, back like in 19...
Superinflated egos.
Superinflated egos.
That took them past, didn't they?
Ego needs
Well,
to.
you can go all the way back to like 1944 with Henry Wallace, who was...
Oh, what a hatchet job they did on him.
Yeah, I know. Right?
God, yeah.
And of course...
The other thing is, Lincoln was the first Republican ever elected, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Before that, it was the Whigs.
And just because, Henry Wallace was a socialist and a pacifist, the business people that made the atomic bomb were thinking, oh, well, we can't test this now if we have a president that's a pacifist. What do you think about that? That's a historical thing that we didn't get in school. But if you think about it,
That's not an actual quote you gave us.
what's that?
That's not an actual quote you gave us.
A quote? No. But he was a pacifist.
I know he was a
Yeah.
president, and he was a wonderful progressive.
Yeah.
But I don't know that the fascists did say we can't have Wallace in there.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Passive.
We can't say it's a quote. Yeah, yeah.
So doesn't that point to the idea that we've had a structured kind of duopoly of power between the Democrats and Republicans?
Well, it's the same thing as it's always existed in Latin America.
Yeah. Yeah.
You had the liberals or the conservatives,
Right.
and they both committed unspeakable acts, but it was okay because they were doing it.
But even in American political history, you look at Democrat and Republican, even in foreign policy, liberal or conservative, during the Cold War era, the Red Scare, they were very close together, even up to today, if you look from a foreign policy point of view. And as I think you rightly said in the conference, regardless of the gentleman's response about Uber alles, there is truth that we are an empire.
Yeah.
That is on the record, even the New York Times says so, which is not maybe a very proud thing, because by definition, empires are they're anti-democratic. So we have a contradiction.
Also, they don't last.
They don't last.
That's right.
I think people have to tell people that.
And I think we're on the decline, don't you?
Oh, God,
Seriously.
No.
Well, of course we are.
No.
Economically.
We'll
I
probably
mean-
create World War III.
You think so?
Oh, yeah.
It's not a permanent thing on the decline, maybe in the moment.
Well, there could be a
But we're gonna
decline
get out
before a
of it.
rise, depending on what the
We have-
transition.
We have to get out of it.
It all depends
You're
on
talking about a transition, even though there is a crisis.
Evolution.
If we
Evolution.
surrender our ownership of the world, then maybe we'll last.
You're right. So you cut defense spending by 50%, I believe, was proposed.
You cut the two-party duopoly.
Cut the duopoly. So you have, this is
Yeah.
what we call the crisis of legitimacy,
Yeah.
crisis of institutions. And institute, obviously, is everything, the whole bag, so to speak.
Right now, there's
So.
That's
Okay. You're being under
Stuck in your
surveillance.
pocket.
Yeah.
right now, there is a potential bill lurking in the Congress. And it has enormous numbers of supporters in both houses that to criminalize anybody who pushes the boycott bill on Israel.
The BDS movement.
yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
To make it a felony, which
Yeah.
apparently has been argued
Like
that.
20 years in prison,
Right.
hundreds of thousands of dollars fine.
Right.
Wow.
Now this, who is spinning whom?
Right.
Are we controlling Israel, or is Israel controlling us?
That's a good point. Don't we give them something like $40 billion a year? And where does that money go? And what are they required to do with that money? Buy our military?
Wouldn't that be another form of money in politics, though? Because now we're engaging domestic and foreign policy being fused together through money. And that's one of the other problems we have in institutions, because people are saying, well, why don't we take care of ourselves first, take care of our economy, and get out of the empire business. But you have other overseas connections and businesses, because we're a globalized economy. And you got some very big, powerful players.
Right.
And it actually revealed itself through the Trump administration, where he says, well, his rhetoric was what? We're going to bring jobs back to America. And he played kind of the everyman rhetoric, when in fact he's the penultimate capitalist billionaire.
Right.
And
Right.
so we're
Who doesn't even
we're,
pay his people well.
we're in an
Yeah,
age of
yeah.
irony. And I think that leads to the political confusion we addressed earlier.
That's right.
How do we clear that up? And back to what you said, you should start an electoral system.
Yeah.
You know.
We need to get people into local offices. Hello, this is Nice Wander, and you are watching the NOWMAN Show. Welcome to everybody watching live on YouTube. And we are here today to have a discussion about building a united left front. And you might say, Now, man, what is that all about? Well, let's get into that right now. First, let's meet the panel. Everybody go around the table here, just say a little bit about yourself, give your name and where you're coming from. Let's start over here. We're bringing back from the Future Is A Mixtape, Matt Snyder.
Good to be back. Thank you so much for inviting me, Dan. So I teach at UC Riverside, and I'm started up a podcast about the future. Actually, how to have a livable future called the Future Is A Mixtape.com. And my other half here, unfortunately, but we run weekly to bi-weekly podcasts on solutions rather than trying to diagnose a corpse that's already a corpse. We're looking forward to creating a future with people.
Fantastic.
Hello, I'm Kallas, and I'm a professor of political science at Miramar College, and I've been on Dan's show on a number of occasions, and also the Democracy at Work coordinator, of which I also work with Dan.
I'm John Snyder. I'm a local community organizer with Ground and Democratic Socialists of America, LA, and nationally I also work with About Face, Veterans Against War, and Veterans for Burning.
And I'm Kelly Hugh. I'm a comedian and a writer and actor.
He wants to cut.
Who, Cliff does? Technical difficulty, microphone problem, okay. It does happen, we are live, so things happen, so, yeah. All right, this is Nice Wonder. You're watching the NOWMANShow, and we are here discussion about building. Start again? Okay. It's Nice Wonder. You are watching the NOWMANShow, and we are here to have a panel discussion about building a united left front. So let's go around the table and identify all the panelists here by names. Tell your name and a little bit about where you're coming from. Let's start over on this side.
Sure. Hi, I'm Kelly Hugh. I'm an actor working in LA. I'm also an organizer for Snyder, a organization that works with low-income folks. And then I'm also the co-founder of Game LA, which is also a community organization that's on the east side of Los Angeles in the Hollywood, Silver Lake, Echo Park kind of area.
Fantastic.
Yeah. I'm John Motter. I'm a local community organizer also with Ground Game LA, in addition to Democratic Socialists of America, Los Angeles. And nationally, I work with About Face, Veterans Against War, and Veterans for Burning.
Fantastic.
Hello, I'm George Kallas. I'm a political science professor at Miramar College and also the coordinator for Democracy at Work San Diego, and also I work with Dan in Arete Media Productions as a co-partner.
Fantastic.
My name is Matthew Snyder. I teach at UC Riverside in the University Writing Program. In my downtime, I do activism, and I founded a podcast called The Future Is A Mixtape, which is about creating and thinking about solutions tangibly, both locally and nationally, and to think strategically about opening the state of the cage. I do think the state is a cage, but it can come in different sizes, and we can even make a key to get out of it. So those are some of the projects I'm interested in.
Fantastic. So let's get right into it. We don't have a moment to waste. I mean, we don't. We really don't. We've run out of time. We're running out of time. All of the above. So we're in, as we know, deep economic and political crisis right now, and virtually nothing is being suggested to address that, let alone do anything about it. So, I mean, just use a recent example of what went on in Puerto Rico, and the slow to almost no response, which is just shocking and appalling to me personally. And then knowing that how slow things are still progressing, even in New Orleans and the Gulf after Katrina, which was how many years ago now. So we see through Oxfam statistics, the poverty is still there. The income inequality is growing year by year. Fewer people are getting more and more of the wealth, which, by the way, we all create together. And pathetically, from a political standpoint, as much as we all love Bernie Sanders, how many people from the Congress does he have standing with him for Medicare for all? 12. Pathetic. I mean, I'm going to call it for what it is. It's absolutely pathetic. Okay, so this is just kind of leading into this. You know, Democrats and Republicans are all on board to increase an already inflated military budget, and it goes on and on and on and on. Okay, now. We've talked about solutions many, many times on this show, and one of the reasons why I created this panel discussion is so we can get more people together to talk about this. I thought it's fitting now to start moving forward aggressively on platforms and understanding policies and how you put these together and how people are already doing this. Okay, so first of all, let's look at what's going on in Europe. Let's go back. Let's just get a little history since this is the month of Occupy. We can do that. In Spain, if you recall, Podemos, right, came out of the Indignados movement, which inspired Occupy Wall Street, and the 99% movement, which we've talked about on this show. Then Syriza, with supposedly far left political party, was voted into power in 2015. Okay, then Bernie Sanders. We have to mention this, even though we know about the superdelegates, and we also know the favoritism of the National Committee for Hillary Clinton. He still, as far as we know, at least got 13 million votes, and 1,900 delegates, a few have been sitting around this table, were in Philadelphia. Okay, Portugal, in 2015, the national elections, 3 parties unified there, because in a parliamentary system, that's how it works. You get a majority. The Portuguese Socialist Party, the Portuguese Communist Party, and the anti-capitalist Left Bloc Party. They rule the country. And as of October 1st, 2017, guess what? They won the municipal elections as well. Macron in France was elected basically as a neoliberal. His popularity has been plummeting, and that is, to put it mildly. And so, I mean, ending this on the Labour Party in the UK. 6 months ago, who would have thought that Jeremy Corbyn would be gaining as much momentum as he is? Hundreds of thousands of people, particularly young people, are joining the Labour Party, and they do have now what they call a manifesto. If you go online, you'll see it is a massive amount of information that people have worked very diligently on. So, to that point, let's get into solutions here, and let's start talking about these platforms. First of all, George Kallas is our political analyst here for the NOWMAN show, comparing let's say the Bernie Sanders platform, the Green Party platform, and the UK Labour Party platform. How would you contrast these?
Well, in my point of view, looking at the Corbyn victory and going over the manifesto, what I discovered is that they have it very well organized, they have it very detailed, and they have I would not say progressive. They actually have very close, I would call a near socialist concept in Britain, of all places, which is kind of the neoliberal capital of Europe, especially the city of London. It's kind of like our Wall Street. And it took the conservative Tories for a loop, because he had such an outpouring of young voters when he promoted this manifesto, which was part of the platform that he used. And the core of it is something that we're talking about here, is economic democracy, where he went back to the, I believe it was 1976, policy of trying to make industrial level co-ops. I think it was in the aircraft industry at that time.
That's right.
Right. And he wants to bring that back. Well, what happened was you had the Thatcher era, essentially in the 1980s, they came in and was kind of the neoliberal revolution that demolished a lot of the public ownership in the British economic sector. And then you had their versions of the corporate Democrats was New Labour under Blair. He was kind of their version of Bill Clinton. In fact, they're very close, especially in the 1990s.
Yeah.
And so what
Personally,
they did,
even
right,
close.
exactly. What Blair did essentially was went towards a neoliberal direction, was essentially continuing, as some Brits say, essentially Thatcher's policy for her. In fact, I believe there was one quote by Margaret Thatcher. She said, actually, her greatest, result of her administration was creating the new Labour Party. Okay, so you have a lot of parallels between the two, and that's the crisis we're facing today, because the corporate Democrats under the Clinton dynasty, if you will, lost the election last year.
One of the most interesting historical patterns is that there's a kind of a seesaw wave, which you call, where it's Thatcher, then Reagan, then Blair, then Clinton, and we had potentially Bernie Sanders and then Corbyn. So we're looking at right now increasingly likely that there'll be an election in the next year as UKIP falters in its coalition, which UKIP is a kind of Northern Ireland kind of hyper-nationalist, misogynist political party with queerphobic everything, like just really demonstrable politics. And as a result, that coalition is just these 10 seats. And if it falls apart, there'll be another call for an election, which fulfills that pattern of this back and forth. And if Bernie Sanders' organs are okay by 2020, he's got the most valuable organs of anyone right now, because there's so little chance for anyone coming through the democratic apparatus as a political system.
Yeah, it's pathetic actually.
So we want to talk about how to move forward, right?
We want to talk about moving forward. So what? Here's the big surprise. We got the video. Do we have the Jeremy Corbyn video that we can start playing right now? Do we have that keyed up to watch? Okay. What we want to get into here with the group is actually start to create a manifesto, right here, and talk about starting with economics.
Well, back to what we said about, if we take Corbyn's as a template and kind of synthesize what the Bernie-crats have and what the Green Party has, that's how I was kind of looking at it. Starting with economic policy, and then of course we'll go into foreign policy, but economic policy covering generally the basics, back to infrastructure development, alternative energy policy.
So sorry, I don't mean to interrupt, but I need a little clarification of terms right now, because we're talking about a lot of big ideas, but I'm not hearing any specifics about what exactly we're talking about. You say manifesto. Are you talking about a national political platform for a federal election? Is that what you're talking about?
Right, for a united left platform to try to consolidate
and have a presidential candidate specifically.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Because I don't know what we're talking about when we talk about this is the idea for this and blah blah blah. We got to be real specific about what we're talking about. John and I work primarily on a hyper-local and local level, which is where we see major change happening. And so when we talk about not having a candidate who is available to go through the democratic apparatus, that's crazy. That's not true, in my experience, in my opinion. Because, and I'm glad that you said the people who've been working on this already. Because I work with people who've been working on this already. They're not recognized by anyone in any electoral work at all. That doesn't mean they haven't been working on it already. The people I know who are most qualified for public office are people who live in public housing, actually. That's who I know who's most qualified. The biggest issue we have right now in this country is that we have a Congress that has a median income of $1 million. And we have nobody in Congress who actually represents anybody who lives at or below the poverty line, and we have 15% of our population that lives in poverty. So the biggest issue right now is that we have taxation without representation, which I don't know. Does anybody remember that? That seems to be a big thing I heard about once.
Right.
So, and that's the number one issue, is that the people who are least represented are the people who have no money. And I know plenty of people who have no money who are absolutely qualified for public office. They just are not seen as such by anybody who's involved in anything electoral.
Yeah.
That's very good.
So that's a really important thing we need to be talking about before we even talk about what a national platform looks like.
Yeah.
Because I keep hearing the narrative of we don't have anybody coming through the pipeline. We have a ton of people who are available for the pipeline, but the pipeline isn't recognizing them. That's a bigger issue.
It's this worship of celebrity culture that's endemic of the political structure. So people, so for instance, the draft Bernie party,
That's a part of it.
It's all
It's
part
also
of
a meritocracy issue.
Yeah, and this idea that we'll have this one candidate transform things, and if we're going to have a total revolution, we're going to need systemic change on the local level. So for instance, there's a group I'm involved with called IE 2030, which is called Inland Empire 2030, and we're working on the local level, and increasingly I'm more interested in that because politics are kind of done on the electoral level for 3.5 years. There really is nothing substantial that's going to happen. And so local politics will be the transformative politics for the left.
If I may, I'd like also to point out a problem with the conversation we've already had as such, which is talking about countries like France, Portugal, the UK, as though they are comparable to the United States. That is hugely problematic. Those are countries that have a much smaller population than this country does. They have a very different governmental structure. They have a very different history. We continue to, in the media, conflate the United States with individual countries in Europe. And this is a major problem because it decontextualizes for the viewer, for the consumer, what the US is. The majority of people in this country don't understand the massive population of the United States and also the individual populations of each state. So as Californians, we are faced with an atmosphere where nobody in the national media talks about California as though it is the largest state in the country by population. Nobody knows that. Nobody acknowledges it. So we get to talk. Nobody talks about Los Angeles as though it is what it is, which is if Los Angeles was a state, it would be the 20th largest state in the country by population.
Right.
So is that what it is, or larger than 20 states? It's one of the two. The point is that when we talk about Los Angeles and we talk about the state of Minnesota, we're talking about the same population. And that's not talked about, and that is a big part of why we are in the situation we're in, because our people in our country don't recognize the context of where we're living, right? So that's why I
focused on John Ossoff running in Georgia at the city council campaign
in LA with somebody who's more
represents more people.
Who's more powerful.
We shouldn't. Yeah, I agree. We shouldn't strip context from local sovereignty, local ideas of representation.
Well,
but there's patterns of transnational capital that mimic a lot of the things that we're seeing in the United States. So if neoliberalism's successes have been remarkably similar across nation states, its failures are also being felt in Germany, much like it's being felt in California.
Very important.
So I think the solutions we can draw from international sense of solidarity, international sense of socialism, is looking for the kinds of techniques and pathways that are locally horizontal, but that move up that lever. Like I always say, electoral politics is the excrement end of social change. Right? It's the last thing we see. It's the last thing we see when actual effective change occurs. And it's always going to be the local level things that'll start first.
Absolutely.
And because we have the most potential power to transform our community when we work at the local level.
So John has a really interesting experience of this, I think, as a combat veteran and seeing the way that our policies are implemented, right?
Yeah, share with us.
Well, yeah, that's something I really try and stress is getting people to focus on the military-industrial complex and how that's localized, how it intersects with every other kind of issue we're working on, how it's economically an issue when we're spending over half of our federal discretionary budget on defense, and also like as someone who was on the front lines, like in Iraq and Afghanistan, I've seen firsthand the utter failure of our policies, just how flawed they are. So, I can accept that if our counterinsurgency strategy isn't working, what if I can extrapolate that and apply that to basically everything else that the political elites are having us believe is the best course of action, and you need to trust us because we're the experts. And really, we're trying to change that narrative as veterans. Like, no, we're the experts. Like, we were the ones who were actually there. We saw it firsthand. We did these things. Like, y'all never been in combat. Most of them never even served in the military. General Kelly's talking yesterday, and the press secretary was trying to use his service as a defensive mechanism against people questioning his authority. And yeah, the dude's a 4-star general, but he was never like in the trenches. You know, he didn't see serious combat. He was like a general when he was in Iraq. You know, he's getting hot chow and showers in the rear.
That's
while he's
right.
in the,
That's
so
right.
like people really need to question who these supposed experts are, and they need to listen to the people in public housing.
Yeah.
They need to listen to the average grunts who are on the ground.
That's a really good point, you know, because that whole process, it's a systemic thing.
Yes.
It's in a mindset of the people in this country. You know, there's a lot of really wonderful. I grew up in Middle America, so I know a lot about that. There's a lot of really wonderful people, just the sweetest, kindest, caring. You know, my father is the kind of person that I get choked up a little bit, who would give you the shirt off of his back. That's the kind of people that we have in this country. But there's also this ignorance that we cannot deny if you're paying attention. And to the military, it's a military industrial complex. So what that is, that's a capitalist organization, basically, right? That in a partnership with the government, supposedly. But you can see that in our whole corporate structure. You know, where there's this privilege and this status, which is just complete nonsense. You know, and it's tearing us apart at a time when we need to be unified. You know, and it's doing exactly the opposite. And there are all sorts of solutions out there, as we've discussed many times on this show. We have to be the ones.
There are
really
solutions.
are.
That's real. There are real ways that this can get better.
That's
The
right.
hope is not lost. It's
So
really
in building
important.
a united left front from a local standpoint, also from there is the state, there is the national, which is why I was bringing that up. It's all connected, and we need to start from the bottom up.
I mean, one of the main things that we talk about at Ground Game and at Power, and when we're working in coalition. So I work with a community organization that's been around since '99 that works in coalition all across Los Angeles and has for a very long time. And one thing that we talk about is we talk about alignment versus, you know, being completely partnered on everything, right? It's not important for us to be partnered on everything to the point where every detailed policy, there can't be any hiccups. Like, we have to let go of that idea and really commit to being in, if we're in alignment with this organization, even if there's gonna be a policy or a measure or proposition that we're not gonna agree on, we're still in alignment, right? I talk a lot about setting a vector for your organization. This is the vector that we want to move forward on, and then that allows us to remain flexible and move around within that, right? But continuing to stay on that path. And it's something we're seeing a lot with newer groups and bigger and groups that have grown enormously, like DSALA, for example.
Yes, and that's another thing we want to do with this show, and it's just beginning today. We've got like maybe another 8 minutes or so.
To figure it out.
Because, well, no, we're actually not.
Maybe not.
I tell you what we've already figured out is that we're getting to know each other.
Yeah.
And that's a very, very big thing. And that's one of the reasons.
Basis for union organizing.
That's right. It's the basis for
relationship
creating
building and trust.
That's right.
Trust also is the other thing, right? It's about trust.
Yeah.
It's about being able to have faith that, you know, I'll speak with people organized for Westside Renewal Power has been in an actual financial alignment and a partnership with an organization that operates in a different part of LA. We do we do the same work, we do it in very different neighborhoods. We actually have been fundraising together for 2 years. This was something we asked other organizations to join in with us on, and they were afraid.
Oh, really?
And part of that is because we are, at Power, we are competing for the same grants as organizations doing the same work. And we have to figure out how to not be grant dependent as we go forward. Because that money is scarce, that money is controlled by in general, by a lot, by corporate Democrats, right? And so we need to be able to be independent of that money at some point. And one of the ways we've decided to go about that is to do a very radical thing and trust another organization to fundraise with us. So we fundraise with them and we split the money completely down the middle because we trust them. We've been working with them forever. So why can't we put our money literally where our mouth is on that, right? And that's something we've been inviting other organizations to enter into too. And it's a radical new way to fund this movement work, right? Because we do unfortunately have to fund this work, right?
That's right.
But that's part of this movement.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
The United Food Workers and Cesar Chavez knew that really successful movements have a broad-based support mechanism for funding, and so the best movements tend to have a kind of balanced sense of funding. So for Inland Empire 2030, this organization that I'm a co-founder for, we're going to create a membership fee system. So we're going to have people put skin in the game at a very low level. People can choose based on income, much like DSA does, to kind of also sponsor someone else that can't pay for it, so much an Acorn model, but create a kind of community warehouse for ideas, right, where we're all involved in this and that we're all pitching in some way, either through sweat equity, like that you may not have the money, but you can commit to time, you can do things actively, and we should honor that. We should also think about having the funding mechanism doesn't rely just on grants, and I agree, grants can be a dead end, you know.
That's fantastic.
So do you have examples of the progress you've made in these organizations and alignments?
Of the progress that we made, yeah. I mean, we're a big part of the Fight for 15. We're a big part of the Human Right to Housing Collective. The legislation that's going through City Hall right now about Airbnb. We're a big part of that fight. We also, on a very personal level, we fight for our members individually. You know, John can tell you about one of our members, Anna Cruz.
Yeah, Anna Cruz, she's with Power, and she's an undocumented mother of 3 living on the west side, and she's a domestic violence survivor living in public housing, and she recently got evicted. We had fought that. We went to City Council member Bonin, who did go to bat for us, but he couldn't stop the eviction. And
he actually wrote a letter to Doug Guthrie, the president of the Housing Authority of Los Angeles, and said, "Do not evict this woman."
Yeah.
And they still did.
I mean, and we fought hard, but for a while, like, there was nothing we could do. So the least we could do was show up, and we helped her move. We got all her stuff out. We got into a storage unit for her.
We bought her a storage unit.
Yeah, so at least she didn't lose
that.
everything, and hopefully we can get her back into housing. And like, these are the things we really need to do for each other. And it's terrible because she's just going to be another number in our homeless count. The homeless number is going to rise.
HACLA created a homeless family.
Yeah, so we made 4 people homeless, and the city will probably take someone else who's experiencing homeless, put them into that unit, use that as evidence of how we're solving the homeless crisis, and then another few years, when the next pit count comes out and homelessness has rise again, the city will go like, well, I don't know, it's a complicated
We're
issue.
putting people into housing.
Yeah, look at this, we're trying. And so like stuff like that's just ridiculous. And if we really had campaigns around that, that's happening all over the city every single day. And these problems are causing much bigger problems. Like when someone becomes homeless, when they become poor and desperate, then what happens? And crime rates go up. And,
That's right.
And they become victimized by police violence and theft, property and destruction of property during police sweeps of the homeless. So these problems really snowball into bigger issues. But
That's right.
This is like part of the community building we need that's so absent in cities, where like people go into a city and they lose their identity and they don't know their neighbors and they don't want to know their neighbors. And they just complain about the noise and everything. It's like, I'm coming from a small town, and my nearest neighbor, like, you couldn't even see them because we live in the woods. Everyone lives miles away, but you know every single one of them, and sometimes you got to walk a mile because you like locked yourself out of your house or whatever. And this is how like
I
we
lived in
support
some
each
rural
other.
areas. Yeah, I know.
I mean, and when we're canvassing for campaigns, and like people don't even want to answer their doors because they're like, I don't want to be bothered right now. Not even out of fear necessarily, but I don't want to answer my door to have to say no thank you to someone. And like that has a major issue on affecting change when we can't get people elected. Although I will say our canvassing was very effective.
It was.
I still see that from, I don't know, maybe it's a millennial thing, but I see that from like middle class people around my age, where they joke about it. They joke about how they're terrified to answer the door, how they have to text someone that, hey, I'm outside, come answer your door, because they wouldn't even knock. And I mean, like, we really need to change our thought process around these things and our attitudes.
And it's through relationship building and trust.
Right.
So,
And
also about threading the needle for folks, so that, I'm a 31-year-old white woman who doesn't live in poverty. I'm currently fighting an eviction right now because my landlord wants to make my unit into an Airbnb. That's happening to me. But that also means X number of people have been displaced from my neighborhood, are now currently homeless for the same reasons that I am being evicted, right? So I need to thread that needle and go, I don't need to organize a bunch of 31-year-old white women. I need to go find the people who are now currently homeless, who have already started organizing and are already doing the work, and say, how can I be of service to your fight? Because that will help my fight, right?
Yeah, fantastic. We're running out of time, so let's do some quick go around closing statements. Make it real quick, and then I'll have a closing statement going forward.
Yeah, I think the topics we brought out are really valuable. One of the things we can think about long term is stop treating real estate like baseball cards that you get to hide in your closet, and start thinking about community land trusts, where the property of your communities
Yes.
rested in the hands of the public.
That's right.
And think in that transformational fact where the land is about the community that you live in, not about someone making a buck.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I concur with Matt. The whole idea of housing is not just local, it's a national issue because of the last crash we just had was a real estate crash.
And we're
of
probably going to
course-
have another one.
Right, the real estate speculators came back in and started buying up, I think it's Blackstone Group was one of them.
Yep.
Nationally, so there's got to be some way to stop put a halt to that immediately.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, everyone needs to organize, get organized. If you're not already, organize your neighborhood, your workplace, your classroom. Look for organizations in your community that are currently doing the work. A lot of them have been there for a long time, and if you need help, that's one other thing we do at Ground Game is we direct people, be like, oh, this is a good fit for you right here. These people are doing work in your part of town, so like that's one thing we can offer.
Fantastic.
Yeah, totally. I mean,
Yeah.
I think that the biggest thing we can do culturally is change the way that we understand the word expertise and what that means, and start, what I will say to folks like me, you know, I'm a person who on site is never given credentials. Nobody thinks I'm an expert in anything because I look like this. So what I will say to people who are in that situation, which is everyone who's not white and male, is that what you can do is you can credential yourself. You can come in and say, this is where I am an expert. And everybody else can start to recognize that expertise comes from lived experience more than anything else. And that's one way that we can shift this and start to understand who are viable candidates.
And so, to the information where people can contact you, we'll put that in the closing credits of this episode. And I just want to say, going forward, let's continue this conversation. You all are invited back because we have work to do. We're building a united left front, and we're getting to know each other, and that's how we do it. And we find out what each other needs, and we go from there. How does that sound?
Sounds great.
Sounds good.
Fantastic. And more to be continued. This is Nice Wonder. Thank you for watching live on YouTube. This is the NOWMAN Show. Be present always.
To the carnival, enjoy the festivity of the diversity. A celebration like a party atmosphere. Live life to the fullest and keep the mind clear. I know it sounds cliche to be the best that we can be. Open up your eyes, tell me what do you see? Now use common sense when it comes to having fun. Don't have to be a rocket scientist to know how this is done. And I say, surf like a Superman, build yourself a dream home, make some career plan, travel around the world, read a stimulate, passionate about each day, create a brand new look, open up to someone who is special to you, knowing that this one feels the same way too. And I say,
England. Oh, Newcastle, Leicester, Lancaster, Liverpool, Manchester. Manchester. Welcome to Hollywood.
I was supposed to be an investigative reporter, not if you grew up in Sun Valley, Chicano neighborhood, where you're supposed to go to Vietnam. And you know, I would have followed that path, but then by accident I hit this radio station called KPFK. And they said that there was going to be a meeting of a group called the Americans for Democratic Action to protest the war. So I went, okay? And it was a bit unusual because at that time, most of the members of ADA, unlike here tonight, most members of the ADA joined when Eleanor Roosevelt was thinking of becoming First Lady. So there was, it was either no hair or gray hair, right? But the other thing that got me there is that there was a new group out that was going to open up the act, just like the billionaires here, called Steppenwolf. And so they were like, so it was like, heading down the highway, no adventure. And then, as they're trying to complete their set, the head of the ADA, a guy named Alan Cranston. Some people know, yeah, he was the Bernie Sanders of his day. And Alan, and he said, he stopped Steppenwolf and said, I think this is a little inappropriate for this audience. But it wasn't. That's what we all needed. We were all born. Anyway, so I ended up, thank you, ADA, because you won the war. And Johnson didn't. Let's not forget. And the action part of it. Many investigations, including, for example, the Exxon Valdez investigation. I went up to Alaska, found out that it wasn't some drunk skipper who ran into a rock. Exxon had turned off, and I kid you not, had turned off the radar on the Exxon Valdez on its maiden voyage because it was too expensive to operate. I can't make that up, but I couldn't get it in the U.S. press. I was there, again, cursing in the darkness. And then I did some other investigations. Harvey knows, Harvey Wasserman there, I investigated nuclear plants for the U.S. Justice Department, racketeering and fraud. Ran a racketeering and fraud investigation, uncovered, among other things, that the builder of the nuclear plant at Shoreham, New York, here at San Onofre, and at a place called Fukushima, Japan, that they had faked something called the SQ seismic qualifications. As it turns out, those plants cannot withstand an earthquake. That was a report, an investigation I made in 1988. By the way, put it in front of a jury. They charged the nuclear industry with racketeering. The jury gave us $4.8 billion judgment, which political manipulation eliminated. We had that report on these plants cannot withstand the earthquake, again at Fukushima. I tried to get into the American newspapers, and I ended up just cursing in the darkness again. This went on until finally about 43, I got a call at 4 a.m. from a newspaper in Britain, The Guardian, which said, we want you over right now. We need this investigation, your investigations. And so I showed up in London, they gave me a hat. I'm an investigative reporter. Right after that, BBC Television hired me to do the same. And I was doing several investigations. One of them was the night of the election in 2000, November 2000. I'm watching TV. I'm living in London now. My kids are getting these upstairs, downstairs accents. But what I'm seeing is black people coming before the cameras. and saying, I couldn't vote, I couldn't vote, I couldn't vote. The black people, what is going on? And I'm thinking, in my conspiracy nut mind, you know, I call it conspiracy nut. That always gets a laugh from the conspirators. Oh, wait, I'm going to stop right here because this is Gilbert from TSA, and he was really upset with me because he said, you won't say you're a socialist. And so tonight I want to admit that this year I've become a card-carrying socialist. Here it is. This is my Medicare card. This is my Medicare card. There are millions of us card-carrying socialists. Thank you, Eleanor Roosevelt. Now, so I'm looking, I'm seeing all these black people come in front of the camera, and the conspiracy nut mind of mine, I'm thinking, there must be some computer program that's just erasing the names of black people off the voter rolls of Florida. And sure enough, this is from the computer. Catherine Harris's computers, their secret list of voters. And by the way, it says BLA, BLA, BLA. What race could that? What are these voters? I actually, when I saw that, I kid you not, I thought blah blah blah. That's what I thought. I said, what is blah blah? Why are all these voters blah blah? We can laugh, except the punchline of that joke, by the way, is George W. Bush, and so he won Florida supposedly by 537 votes, but 56,000 black people were removed from the voter rolls because they were called on this list. They were called felons, and exactly 0 were ex-cons. Their only crime was voting while black in America. And this list, okay, here's an example of the black person. There was a guy convicted named John Fitzgerald Jackson, and who was black. And the voter who lost his vote, the same guy, right? Because his name is Johnny Jackson Jr., right? Same voter? Because, you know, Jackson's not a common name. Republican. But throughout, not one legal voter. I got these lists. How? From you as well. If you see the film, you know that one of these hats actually really does have a camera in it. This one? Now, was this, did the Jeb Bush himself know about this? I got a tip from a little birdie. I have this little birdie, fantastic. And he comes and he drops little documents. And I was told Dan Rather wanted to do this story for CBS because I was cursing in the dark again from London on BBC television, the top of the nightly news. This is how the American election was stolen. The front page of the Guardian newspapers, and every paper in the Western world was my story covered on the front page, except it bounced off the electronic Berlin Wall here in America, which was still in the dark. I was just cursing at the darkness from London. Okay? And so Dan Rather, I kid you not, his people called me up and said, we want to do this story. I said, great. Well, if you have something else, I said, Jeb Bush personally ordered the purge of black people. I said, how do you know that? There's a document. There's a document, and I've been given the date. It's September 18th, 2000. And it's from Catherine Harris's office. Get that document, you got your new story, a big story. And they didn't run the story the next day. And then they didn't run the next day, and the next day, and the next day. I said, what happened? Where's the story? And they said, well, sorry, Greg, we checked it out, and Mr. Kallas, your story just doesn't stand up. I said, what do you mean it doesn't stand up? I said, well, we called Jeb Bush's office, and they said he didn't do it. And I said, oh my God, I didn't think of that. So I called up Jeb Bush's office and Catherine Harris's office, and I said, I understand there's a document dated September 18th from the Governor Bush directing you to remove felons from the voter rolls, which is illegal, by the way, but there's a document. Could you send that to me? I know that Ms. Harris wants me to have it. And 15 minutes later, in my fax machine, Jeb Bush did it. Now, here's the thing. I put that on the nightly news BBC, every major paper in the world except in the United States where it was lost in the darkness. So once again, I'm cursing in the darkness. And you know, now Okay, so that's it, right? Everything's fine now. You can disband American Democratic Action now. So now it's 2017. And as you know, we held an election. Nothing was wrong with it. You heard Hillary Clinton. She said no American candidate for president has ever challenged the sanctity and the veracity of the vote. Okay, never. She also said, by the way, that in 2000, she did say that the vote was stolen in 2000 in Florida, and she said, I will never forget it. Amnesia, it happens. And what happened? What happened? Here's what happened. Okay, now we've got this